A deal on Dickens, who could resist? A stack of Austen, warmly kissed. Golden Age crime tales twist and turn, every page a treasure to learn. Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea, reading always feels so free.
Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I think this might be the last book review that I record in this sitting, but maybe I'll do one more. I'm not sure yet, because I'm kind of on a roll and I'm kind of inclined to keep going until I don't feel like I can. Anyway, I want to review my second Neo Marsh that I've needed to do during this period of time, and that is the second one in the Roderick Allen mystery series. And Roderick Allen is I think all of her mysteries are written with him as your main detective. But this is the second book in that series, which is Enter a Murderer. Now, this is the second, like I said, this is the second one in the series. It took me embarrassingly about half the book to realize that your narrator character, it's not narrators in like it's a eye point of view, like a first person, but he's definitely your narrator character. You're seeing things through his eyes. And that's Nigel Bathgate, who is the young reporter in this book. It embarrassingly took me almost halfway through the book to realize that he was the young reporter in the previous book, A Man Lay Dead, which it was mildly embarrassing that I hadn't picked up on that the first time, much earlier in reading this. I think that this is actually a stronger mystery than A Man Lay Dead. For one thing, it manages to avoid some of what I mentioned in A Man Lay Dead. There were some I consider fantastical elements like that kind of didn't feel quite in place. It almost felt like Marsh was going a little bit melodramatic at one point by bringing in some international elements that kind of felt out of place with the rest of the country house mystery vibe that she had going on there. This one stays consistent. Everything is very much set in the reality of the theater that you're dealing with. So it centers around the cast of a play that's being put on at the Unicorn. And I want to say it's Something in the Beaver. I don't even know if the play actually exists or if it was something that they just made up for this particular book. It's Something in the Beaver. Let's see. Oh, here it is. The Rat and the Beaver. So I don't know if it's an actual play that ever existed, but that's what's in the center of this. And you have the play and all the casts that are in that play and all the, jealousies and personality conflicts that might occur within that setting that eventually end up leading to a very public murder. And Allen has a front row seat, literally. So Nigel was able to, through his press credentials and his friendship with the leading man, to get a couple tickets. Now, his girlfriend, I don't think it's his fiance yet, but his love interest from this book wasn't able to join him for the play. So he talks Allen into going with him. And Allen apparently likes, dramatizations, which I believe came up in this as well. And so he was very happy to go along with him. And he gets a front row seat to the murder that does occur. So he's right on the scene, able to jump on things very freshly after it happens. You have plenty of dramatic characters to deal with because you are dealing with the, theater community there. And you have things complicated, of course, by the fact that Nigel is friends with one of the suspects involved. And so he has to feel like he needs to balance out his loyalty to his friend, but also wanting to assist Alien in getting this murder solved. Plus, he wants to get a, story for his paper as well, an exclusive. And by working with Alien, he's able to get his exclusive. Alien just has to approve what goes through. So, how this stands as a mystery. Well, like I mentioned, you have all your suspects that are, your pool of suspects, and your murderer is pulled from your pool of suspects. The murderer doesn't come out of nowhere. I thought that, it was interesting that, first of all, I thought the red herrings were set up well. I felt like they didn't feel like they were wasted, even if it was a red herring about who solved the murder, or who committed the murder. Even if there's red herring initially about who committed the murder, that red herring eventually, at least one of the red herrings, eventually leads to another clue that does help solve the murder, which I actually really like when red herrings aren't wasted, when they actually lead to another actual fact that then helps solve the mystery. That it's really nice when your author is able to set things up that way. And I do feel like this was done at least once, if not more times, in Enter a Murderer. So I do feel like that was nicely set up. It's always interesting when you're able to set up a situation where the crime is committed in plain view, almost a la G.K. Chesterton's, The Flying Stars, where Flambeau's last crime, where he ends up stealing the jewels while he's performing in a pantomime, and actually manages to beat up on some policemen because in such a way that everyone believes it's a part of the pantomime and the Punch and Judy show, whereas reality it's not. It's very real, but people don't realize it. You get some of that element with this by the fact that what occurs on stage is not realized to be real right away by everyone in the audience. Alien realizes it pretty quickly, but not everybody does. I really like the way that Nigel is utilized, as the fact that we do see the characters through his biases, but we also understand while we're seeing them through his biases that we are seeing them through his biases, which I think is very nice when you're able to have that be clear, so that even as a reader, you know that what Nigel believes might not be true, because he has enough conversation with Alien where you realize that even though they work together, Nigel's point of view might not be accurate. So it is nice that Marsh is able to set that up, because it allows her to lay red herrings without being super sneaky about it or being underhanded about it, because we are limited by Nigel's point of view for the most part, and we understand that he might not be completely reliable as a narrator because he comes in with his own bias, even if he does present us with everything that he learns from Alien. And that's why we don't feel cheated as well, or at least why I didn't feel cheated as a reader as well when the ending came up, because the signs were there, but because Nigel colored them with a different with a different opinion that he had, we were more inclined to see them from his point of view. But I think upon a rereading, I'll be able to read it and see where Alien told Nigel things and be like, yep, no, he definitely, that was laid down. It's just Nigel didn't pick up what was being laid down. And so the reader doesn't necessarily pick up what's being laid down. But it's not because Marsh hides it from you, which I really appreciate. I think this is better than A Man Lay Dead. I can see where she's getting a little bit more confident in her craft. There's a bit of awkward tension between Alien and the leading lady, but he manages it. It's a bit of a distraction, but he's allowed to be human. So, even though I didn't love that, it didn't feel like it was such a huge handicap that it made it unreadable. So I think I very much enjoyed this even more than A Man Lay Dead. I'm not quite sure where I'd compare it with A Clutch of Constables. Clutch of Constables almost feels so different because Alien doesn't come in till partway through because his wife is your main character you're following for most of that book. So it almost doesn't even feel like it's the same series because he doesn't come in until so much later for Clutch of Constables. Whereas of the books that I feel like actually feel like Alien books because he's there the entire time or for most of the time, I would say that this would be the favorite of the two. I look forward to reading the next one, which I think is The Nursing Home Murders. Got that one fairly recently. I do enjoy Marsh's work. I like the size of her books. They're nice, quick reads. I really do enjoy the detective. I don't feel like that she cheats. I feel like she does play fair, and I feel like subsequent readings of her books can only make them more enjoyable. What else can I say without giving anything away? I love the personalities that we're dealing with, some of the different melodramatics that we deal with within the community. I think that the character Saint, which is not actually his last name, I believe that's a name that he took on. Yeah, his original name was Jacob Symes. His name that he took on upon entering the industry was Saint. But when you're dealing with his character, he feels like he could be a real character within that industry. And actually, all of them do kind of feel like they could exist within the reality of that industry. I love the point where he tries to basically bully Alien into not performing performing the interviews he intends to perform on the different cast. And he tries to kind of bulldoze him. And Alien's like, nah, that's not going to happen. I'm not performing these interviews at your sufferance. I'm performing these interviews because that is my job. This is murder, and that's what I need to do. And if you don't like it, you can lump it, which is essentially, what he says, not quite in as many words. But I did like that little bit of clash of personalities between Alien and Saint. I love the way that the murderer murderer is handled. And I did kind of have questions in my head about certain things that by the time the murder was revealed, I was like, okay, I kind of didn't quite see that coming, but I had wondered because of X circumstance if maybe the wool is being pulled over our eyes and if Y person is actually the murderer. So I appreciated the fact that thought even crossed my mind because of the way that Marsh handled the situation, where even if it wasn't necessarily the person I thought would have committed the murder through most of the book, I did find that because Marsh had me questioning at one point, I ended up feeling like there was definitely a level of fair play within this book, which is a huge priority for me within these mysteries, these Golden Age mysteries. So, really enjoyed this book. I do recommend this one. Even though I preferred this one to Man Lay Dead, I would still recommend a person start with A Man Lay Dead first, if only because I generally like to, when I read a series, even if they don't need to be read sequentially, I generally like to read the book with the introduction of the main character in it before I read any of the others. So I can read all the other ones out of order if I want, but I just want to at least read the very first one first. So, like, if I was just starting to read Poirot now and haven't, read him like I have, over the past 30 years almost. But if I was to, at this day, read my very first Agatha Christie ever, I would actually tell myself, that version of myself, to start with A Mysterious Affair at Styles instead of what I actually started with, which is Hercule Poirot's Christmas. And that's because A Mysterious Affair at Styles is the introduction to Poirot. Just like I would recommend, I believe it's Murder at the Vicarage, which is the introduction to Miss Marple. I just think that when one can, it's probably best to read the first mystery where the character is introduced. Not necessary, but in my opinion, leads to the best experience of that character, just because the very first point where the character gets introduced at all is when then we get introduced to him. Now, to be fair, with the mystery series, the way that a lot of these Golden Age mysteries are set up, where they're within a series, but they are still like standalone, they don't require knowing what came before necessarily because they're like episodic. But because of that nature of these mysteries, Golden Age mysteries, where they're only really loosely considered a series, I would, because of that format, a lot of times the detective gets introduced each book, to your cast of characters. So even if you were not to read like A Man Lay Dead first, you're not going to suffer a whole ton by not doing so. You just get some of the other references better if you've read A Man Lay Dead first, because Nigel does make an oblique reference to A Man Lay Dead within this book. But this book would not become lesser if you were to read it without having been familiar with A Man Lay Dead ahead of time, just because of the episodic nature of these books, where every time you meet Inspector Allen, he gets introduced again, almost like it's the first time that you're reading him. So that's one of the beauties of this kind of story format. I prefer to read the first one ever written first, but I don't have to. Anyway, I'm starting to get a bit tired. Really enjoyed sharing with you some book reviews. Hope that you got something out of it. If anyone can think of their favorite Neil Marsh, please share that in the comments. Or if you have a Golden Age author that you like better. Agatha Christie doesn't count. Everyone knows she's the queen. So someone who's not Agatha Christie, who's a Golden Age author that you really like, I'd like to hear about in the comments. Anyway, thanks very, very much for joining me. Hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you the next time. God bless. Bye-bye.
Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea. Reading always feels so free.